Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Africa Updates, reaching you from Trust TV here in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. And this week on the program, we'll be touching issues taking place on the African continent. Just stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It's still Africa Updates on Trust TV, and I'm your host, Chiamaka Nwafor. Before the break, I told you we're looking at stories from the continent, what's happening, what's taking place. And we will start with Sudan, where the army says it on Friday retook the Republican palace in Khartoum, the state, the capital. Now, according to videos on social media, its soldiers inside gave the date as the 21st day of Ramadan, which is Friday. Here's more from Africa News.
Sudan's military said it retook the Republican palace in Khartoum, the last bastion in the capital of rival paramilitary forces, after nearly 2 years of fighting. Social media video shows the soldiers inside giving the date as the 21st day of Ramadan, which was Friday. The fall of the Republican Palace, a compound along the Nile River that was the seat of the government before the war erupted and is immortalized on Sudanese banknote and postage stamps, marks another battlefield gain for Sudanese military. It has made steady advances in recent months under their Army Chief General Abdel Fattah Burhan. This victory means the rival Rapid Support Forces under General Mohamed Hamdan Daglo have been expelled from the capital of Khartoum after Sudan's war began in April 2023. However, the group did not immediately acknowledge the loss, which likely won't stop the fighting as the RSF and its allies still hold territory elsewhere in Sudan. Late Thursday, the RSF claimed it seized control of the Sudanese city of Al-Maliha, a strategic desert city in North Darfur. Sudan's military has acknowledged fighting around Al-Maliha, but has not said it lost the city.
Still on happenings over in the eastern part of the continent. Presidents of Congo and neighboring Rwanda met on Tuesday in Qatar for their first direct talks since Rwanda-backed M23 rebels seized two major cities in mineral-rich eastern Congo earlier this year. Here's more.
Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi and Rwanda's counterpart Paul Kagame met in Doha, Qatar on Tuesday for their first direct talks in a bid to curl down the situation in eastern Congo, where the M23 rebels have seized two main towns since the war started. In a joint statement, the two leaders agreed to a ceasefire during the meeting convened by Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the energy-rich nation's ruling emir. The conflict in eastern Congo escalated in January when the Rwanda-backed rebels advanced and seized the strategic city of Goma, followed by Bukavu in February. The two countries affirmed their commitment to immediate and unconditional ceasefire, but the joint statement offered no specifics on how that ceasefire will be implemented or monitored. M23 is one of about 100 armed groups that have been vying for a foothold in mineral-rich eastern Congo near the border with Rwanda, in a conflict that has created one of the world's most significant humanitarian crises. More than 7 million people have been displaced.
Still staying with happenings in the DRC, it seems that the captain of the M23 rebel group is not in agreement with these talks in Doha, as Colonel Nangas doesn't support the Tuesday's ceasefire. The rebel leader has announced that the fighting will continue. Take a look.
Colonel Nanga, the leader of the M23 rebel group, has rejected the ceasefire agreement signed earlier this week between Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi and Rwandan President Paul Kagame in Doha. Despite the agreement, Nanga announced that he will press on with military operations in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Nanga, who is the former head of the DRC's Electoral Commission, continues to advance his forces, having seized control of the strategic town of Walikale, located near valuable gold and tin reserves. While he persists in combat, Nanga is awaiting the official outcomes of the Doha talks. He also warned that any potential agreement between Kinshasa and the United States will be met with opposition from the Congolese people, calling it a betrayal. As tensions remain high in eastern DRC, Nanga's actions seems to be threatening to derail ongoing diplomatic efforts. The implementation of the ceasefire remains uncertain, leaving the future of the peace talks and process in doubt.
And from there, we'll move over to North Africa, where Tunisian President Said Kais dismissed Prime Minister Kamel Maduri early Friday, according to an official statement from the presidency. Maduri, a technocrat appointed in August 2024 during a major cabinet reshuffle, has been swiftly replaced by Sara Zafrani Zensri, the Minister of Equipment. The rest of the government remains unchanged. No official reason has been provided for Maduri's removal. Now, this marks the fourth time since Said's 2021 power consolidation that a Prime Minister has been dismissed without prior notice. As per tradition, the presidency announced the decision via a brief Facebook post, offering no further details on the departure. However, Said stressed the need for Zafrani to enhance government coordination and overcome obstacles hindering the expectations of the Tunisian people. The president had recently voiced frustration over government inefficiencies, urging ministers to take more decisive action. At 62, Zafrani becomes Tunisia's second female prime minister, following Najla Bouden, who held the position from October 2021 to August 2023. She is fluent in Arabic, French, English, and German. Zafrani is an experienced infrastructure expert. Now, Said's latest move comes amid growing political tensions, with opposition figures and business leaders facing imprisonment and an ongoing high-profile trial. Over in South Africa, the country is working closely with the Trump administration to strengthen trade ties with the United States, despite diplomatic strains following the expulsion of its ambassador. Let's take a look.
South Africa is actively engaging with the Trump administration to enhance its trade relationship with the United States despite ongoing diplomatic tensions following expulsion of its ambassador. Presidential spokesperson stated on Thursday that President Cyril Ramaphosa is committed to strengthening ties, particularly in trade.
Equally, the president is keen that we look at the opportunity to research the relationship between South Africa and the United States, particularly on the trade front, where there are a lot of opportunities to expand the trade relationship. The TTIC is leading a process to look at that basket of tradable goods and look at how we expand it, so that at an appropriate time, when we begin to have escalated engagements between ourselves and the Trump administration, we're able to also take a more forward-looking approach.
The South African Department of Trade, Industry and Competition is leading efforts to review the range of tradable goods and identify new areas of economic collaboration.
The president is going to take his time in considering his options with regards to this appointment. The absence of an ambassador in Washington does not mean the absence of engagements with the Trump administration. Equally, just as you have here in South Africa, the US has not appointed an ambassador yet, but we've been able at various levels of government to continue to have engagements with diplomats from the US Embassy.
The diplomatic tension escalated earlier this week when U.S. Secretary of State declared South Africa's ambassador to Washington persona non grata, citing accusations of race baiting and criticism of President Donald Trump.
Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed reaffirmed on Thursday that his government will not escalate tensions with Eritrea over access to the Red Sea, despite growing concerns from regional officials and experts about the possibility of conflict between the two neighboring nations. Let's take a look.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announced on Thursday that his administration would avoid escalating tensions with Eritrea regarding access to the Red Sea, despite warnings from regional officials and experts about a potential conflict between the two neighboring countries. Concerns about war have intensified recently following Eritrea's declaration of a nationwide military mobilization and Ethiopia's troop movement towards the border, as reported by diplomatic and official sources. Abiy emphasized that while access to the Red Sea is crucial for landlocked Ethiopia, his government is committed to resolving the issue through peaceful dialogue rather than military confrontation. Renewed hostilities between the two nations could jeopardize the historic reconciliation that earned Abiy the Nobel Prize in 2019 and could lead to a humanitarian crisis in a region already affected by the ongoing conflict in Sudan.
You're still on to Africa Update on Trust TV. More news and stories when we return. Please do stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Now let's get to more stories. Now there are plans as countries face increasing risk of climate-related disasters in the Horn of Africa. A trade bloc has partnered with humanitarian organizations to develop a disaster preparedness program to enhance early warning systems and strengthen risk management across the 8 member states. Juma Majanga reports from Nairobi, Kenya.
Climate extremes are becoming a familiar pattern across the world. Experts say the effects have been devastating in the Horn of Africa due to a lack of preparedness. An 8-country trade bloc is coming up with solutions. The Intergovernmental Authority on Development, or IGAD, has developed an anticipatory action plan to help the region's member states minimize losses caused by climate disasters.
We are trying to provide a guidance as IGAD, as a regional body, to help countries and the region transition towards anticipation, which is also in par with the climate crisis narrative, the development narrative, but also, most importantly, on how to address the humanitarian needs and the humanitarian crisis that seems to be perennial in the IGAD region. The
IGAD Anticipatory Action Plan provides member countries and other partners with a roadmap for putting in place necessary measures before disasters strike. The process begins at the IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center in Nairobi, Kenya, where staff members monitor disasters, collect data and analyze early disaster indicators. The findings are then communicated to member states through alerts or advisories.
Since all major hazards within our region are climate related, so getting early warning in terms of extreme weather and climate issues will form anticipatory action in terms of disasters.
The anticipatory plan is being implemented in partnership with key humanitarian organizations with operations in the region, including the World Food Programme Eastern Africa and the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, or FAO. FAO Kenya's Hamisi Williams says climate change has affected Africa's food production and productivity.
It has also affected our levels of trade, the entire system. And that means that it has overly reduced the ability of us to have nutritious food on the table.
Williams says having an anticipatory action plan can help the region better cope with future disasters.
We saw how every time we play catch up with these disasters. But if we have a defined roadmap like now and we follow the roadmap, then what we are trying to do now is to say we are going to be ahead of the disaster when it comes.
IGAD's Amdihun says implementation of the action plan offers a win-win situation for governments and communities in the region.
If the risk, as you anticipate, materializes, that means you have averted a big catastrophe to the communities, to their assets, to their livelihoods, and so on. If it doesn't unfold the way you expected it, you have still invested on communities.
The Horn of Africa has seen some of the worst climate-related disasters in recent years, including deadly droughts and subsequent flooding. Experts hope the regional transition from a reactive to a proactive approach to climate extremes will help protect vulnerable communities from their devastating impacts.
Still staying with matters relating to the environment and ecosystem, over in Malawi, the Majete Wildlife Reserve conservation experts are testing birth control methods on lions. Now, the goal of the wildlife management efforts is to control the lion population to ensure antelopes and other prey species continue thriving. Lamek Messina reports from the reserve in Chikwawa district.
The lions scramble for food, but evidently they are getting enough, as wildlife experts say the lion population here has grown to over 100. The experts say the population boom will likely lead to a decline in smaller species the lions prey on.
We haven't seen any significant impacts on prey populations yet. However, based on learnings in other reserves all across the continent, we know that those impacts will come. So in order to avoid those impacts from happening, we want to make sure that we reduce our lion population to a reasonable size.
The target is to reduce the lion population at least by half. The Majete Wildlife Reserve is home to various animal species. Authorities say animals at risk of depletion include rare species of antelopes, elands, and hartebeests.
Every now and then we see something, out of the ordinary, such as a sable. But in general, it definitely seems to be waterbuck buffalo and warthog being taken the most.
Craig says so far, 13 adult males and 15 adult female lions have received contraception.
We first requested in 2022 to have contraception of females. It was a deslorilin implant that went in between the shoulder blades. Then vasectomizing the male lions started in about May last year.
Some animal welfare campaigners fear the contraception methods may harm the animal's health. They say moving the lions would be a better option. Conservation experts say they haven't seen any side effects from the contraception and say that in Malawi there aren't enough fenced-in reserves to safely put the lions.
So it would be irresponsible to move lions to reserves that don't have fences. Now, the only reserves in Malawi that have actually got fences right around the reserve are the AP Parks run reserves. And the other one that we've got in Malawi is Lwande National Park. But Lwande's got its own number of lions, and their numbers have also increased.
In the meantime, authorities say with such safety concerns, contraception remains a better option to manage the booming lion population in Malawi.
Who knew that animals could get contraceptive pills, let alone lions? Oh well, we learn every day. And now let's go to the happenings of this month. Actually, earlier in the month we celebrated the International Women's Day, and our remaining stories are going to be celebrating things that relate to the female folk. We're going to start over as the world celebrates International Women's Day 2025 under the theme Accelerate Action. Fatoumata Mega's story stands as a testament to the power of women in shaping peace and security in conflict zones. Let's take a look.
She's known as Madame La Paix. Fatoumata Maigi has made her life a fight against the proliferation of weapons and for the security of her country, Mali. With unshakable determination, she founded and now runs the Association des Femmes pour les Initiatives de Paix, an NGO born out of the silence and suffering of those who, for too long, had been the first victims of violence, women. Alongside these women fighting in the shadows, she embodies resilience and hope. They refuse to be reduced to the role of powerless witnesses. United by the same ideals, they're fighting together to rebuild peace and give their battered land the stability it deserves. You can't build peace in an environment of violence. And an environment that supports violence today is weapons. If no one has weapons, if no one uses weapons, I think that verbal conflicts will go away. And even if people were to fight, it wouldn't be as worrying as all that. Our goal is to see how people can resolve their differences without using weapons. And until now, women have not been aware of the seriousness of the availability of weapons in the hands of non-professionals. As a result, in our investigations, we found that there are families where there are weapons in attics, where weapons are in canteens. There are even explosives in there, even although it's very dangerous. Born into a military family, Fatoumata, who's now 60 years old, was living in Gao when the jihadists took control of the region. She remembers the dark hours, the ordeals that, far from breaking her spirit, have fueled her determination. We meet her at her home in a district of Bamako. I grew up well. Because I grew up in a family environment. I wasn't adopted or brought up by anyone else. I was brought up by my mother and father. Certainly, someone thinks that when you have parents who are civil servants in a country like Mali, where people move around a lot, that it's difficult. Maybe it's difficult for the parents, but I didn't feel any difficulties because I was with my family. Well, there's a bit of difference. It's that I didn't have time to see my father every day. I didn't have the possibility to see him every day because he was often away. And even although I was a child, I knew that wherever he went, it was dangerous.
Là où elle partait, c'était dangereux. L'atrocité que je ne suis pas parvenue à oublier encore.
The atrocity that I haven't yet managed to forget was in June 2018. I got a call from Bamako to tell me that the town of Gao had been attacked. And I asked, what kind of attack? And I was told, attack with explosives. I said, what kind of story is that? I asked the minister, and he said, at the moment, there are a lot of deaths. I asked the women to come back, not to go out, because there's been an explosives attack, and we had the United Nations light armored vehicles in front of our building, and it's not in our favor to go out, because we all know what they're aiming at. I asked the women not to go out. I called, and one thing led to another, and I learned that it was on the north side of the town that two vehicles had tried to break the checkpoint, and the French soldiers wouldn't let them through. It wasn't a pretty sight. That's what I saw. It wasn't a pretty sight. They exploded. The vehicles exploded. The two-story buildings collapsed. People were gutted, completely gutted. It was blood. It was flesh. It was pain everywhere. There's no reason to go to war. Where is the reason?
It's another win for women as Kirsty Coventry was elected as the president of the International Olympic Committee, IOC. The 41-year-old made history by becoming the first woman and the first African to hold this prestigious position.
The country has made history by being elected as the president of the International Olympic Committee, IOC, becoming the first woman and the first African to hold this prestigious position at the age of 41. The Zimbabwean sports minister and two-time Olympic gold medalist in swimming achieved an impressive victory in the first round of voting, surpassing 6 other candidates in a contest that involved nearly 100 IOC members. Coventry's victory was particularly surprising as she outperformed notable figures such as Britain's Sebastian Coe, Spain's Juan Antonio Samaranch Jr., Frenchman David Lapartier, Jordan's Prince Faisal, Swedish-born Johan Elias, and Japan's Morinari Watanabe. This election was regarded as one of the most unpredictable and competitive IOC presidential races in decades, with no clear favorite leading up to the vote. Coventry becomes the 10th IOC president succeeding President Thomas Bach, whose 12-year tenure will officially end in June 2025.
Congratulations to Kirsty Coventry for that win and breaking bounds for the female folk. And that's it for Africa Update this week. For more of our programs, documentaries and news, don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms and on our YouTube live stream. I am your host, Chiamaka Nwafor, same time, same place next week. Bye for now. That is typically the one telling. So